done too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a very well done, well produced finish. And then right afterwards, I mean, like Stardom loses Tam Nakano because she retired, but surprisingly, I guess maybe not surprisingly in hindsight, Mayu Iwatani, because the reality is that she wanted to go to Marigold from the start. I just thought it's a year later and Stardom is doing so well and Marigold really isn't. But Mayu is just very, very loyal to Raw. She was a teenager who never left the house. You know what I mean? I mean, literally never left the house. She watched, I think it was Dragon Gate wrestling show, but it was a pro wrestling show. And just, I'm going to be a pro wrestler, moves to Tokyo. And, Rossi started her out when he was starting Stardom 13, 14 years ago. And, she lived at his house. You know what I mean? She was, she didn't have any money or anything. And he took care of her. And now she's a star, a big star. And, many people do show loyalty to the people who helped them at the start, and many don't. And she did. And I think it's an admirable quality that at the level she's at, where she could go to WWE, and they wanted her there for years and years and years, and make a ton of money, especially now that, Io Shirai's really crossed over in my mind. I just think ever since the fans kind of started getting behind her in this WrestleMania build, which, originally I don't even think she was supposed to be in. And then they kind of put her in the three-way as the third person. And then she stole the show at Mania. And now, ever since then, and the people are behind her, she's like the best talent in the ring in that entire company right now. Mm-hmm. She's incredible. On Tuesday, my God, she was great in that match. And obviously in Mania as well, and in some of the other TV matches. But I think the Tuesday match was her best since Mania. And it's she can go there, and she could, now that they don't have that mind block. We got our quota of Japanese wrestlers, and not everyone worked out. Obviously, Saraya didn't work out, and she's incredible. But she did not go there. She did not go to AEW. Where she could have. I think right now, honestly, if she went to AEW, as talented as she is, and as much as they're starting to focus a lot more on women's wrestling, and they have Mercedes who wants to have great matches, I think that she would be able to go there and do very, very well. And she stayed with Rossi, and I have to give her credit for that decision. Most people wouldn't have made it.
Well, she did end the little quote that she had by saying, "But there is a possibility that I may go overseas one day."
Well, there's always the possibility. I know she said, "Well, I don't want to leave my dog and my cat," and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that very newsworthy. And I know that we just put a show up on the website or maybe today or yesterday. Adam Summers and Mike Sempervive covered the whole thing. They also talked about Iwatani as well. So that is up there for if people want to listen to kind of a review of the show, much like what you wrote in the Observer. So back to the AAA thing real quick before we move on. There's a timing aspect of this that you wrote about, because now the story is that the deal is not actually done. So you wrote that this is probably a little bit more reactionary to what AEW and CMLL are doing.
I think that with the benefit of hindsight, I think that's pretty clear, especially because as soon as that Arena Mexico date was announced, I did hear from people in WWE who were like they were just mad at the announcement, and it's we have something big, right? Which is the purchase of AAA, obviously. And, so, yeah, it's not done. It's not signed. There are minor points to work out, but they got that announcement out right away. They were going to do that show in LA. That didn't come together at the last minute, but I think the announcement of it, was possibly rushed. I'm not sure about that. And that other show, the big show in Monterey, where they're probably going to send, top WWE talent. I'm going to guess to the Triple Mania in Monterey on the 15th, which is 3 days before the AEW show on the 18th. But Monterey and Mexico City are different. They're different markets. But for Mexican media coverage, it's like WWE is running a show first with, I don't know the names, but I got to think Rey Mysterio, he may not be on it now because he's had surgery.
I mean, he should be there at least.
Be there, perhaps do media there. But, Penta Phoenix, people like that.
So could this have been just with Penta Phoenix? Because I remember when they were coming up for renewal in AEW, I think you had written that they were just I don't want to talk about renewal, we're leaving. Yeah. Would they have had some sort of, maybe some insight into this thing coming down the pipe?
Let's see. I would say I would expect that they would have heard about it, but whether they would have, it's you hear so much when it comes to stuff like that, because it's not like Dorian said, just so people who don't know or think, oh my God, came out of nowhere. He'd been negotiating since February 2022, so over 3 years ago. He started these talks with Philippe, and then WWE was part of this. So yeah, like I'm sure they would have been told whether they believed it. They probably did, but yeah, they would have. I can't say 100% they would have known, but I would say 85%. They were aware that there were talks. Maybe more than 85%, they were aware there were talks. The talks were serious, and I don't know if that's the reason they left. I mean, they had gotten stale in AEW. It really was for them the right move to make at the time, even though unless it's a pure money thing, and again, I don't know what each company offered, and they don't either because they never really negotiated with it. I would suspect strongly that AEW would have made both of them a better offer than WWE just because we've seen it in the times. But some people, especially with Penta, who's not that he's old, but he's late 30s and everything, so it's time to go to you kind of would go with the money at that point. But they again. They were tired of AEW. There was a ceiling on them. They'll find there's a ceiling on them in WWE, but right now, again, it's got to be better for them because they're on the ascent rather than plateauing, and they're performing in front of much bigger crowds, which is always fun, and they're being treated, given more TV time and more wins. But of course, when you switch, that's going to happen. I mean, the same thing would happen. You can say the same thing with Ricochet. It's like he's getting more quality TV time and more wins and things like that in AEW because it's always the case when you switch. If you're any good, the new company's got to feature you more when they first get you, or else they're basically squandering their investment.
I mean, for him, it's just like, gosh, he's got so much more life. Like, it looks like he's having a great time and doing really good work.
And Ricochet. Both of them, from as far as a quality, both of them benefited greatly from leaving. And I don't get the impression that Penta even considered not leaving. Ricochet, I know, was leaning towards it, but it wasn't like he was like 100% on it. But he made the call, and I would say, everybody looked at his tweets and everything and all that, and a lot of that's in character. But I would say that, if I was him, with all things considered, I would say that leaving was the greatest move I ever made in my entire career. So, I'm sure for Penta you could say the same thing, because, they had plateaued there. So I mean, I always say with most guys, it's like, everyone, there's certain stylistic things and everything, like Darby Allin, and he knows this, and he said it. He really never should go to WWE, because it will never be worth it to him. Orange Cassidy should never go, it'll never be worth it to him. But most guys, if they've had 5-6 years, and you're in AEW and everything like that.
I don't know if I'd say that publicly though. It doesn't help your next contract necessarily.
Yeah. But most people would benefit from change of scenery if the sides were equal. It's like, just as an example, like McIntyre when his deal was up, and I never expected him to go to AEW ever. When that whole thing was going on, and he hadn't signed the new deal, and his deal actually was over at one point. And people, when he's going to jump, and it's like, it's like, again, I don't know, but I know that I know he hadn't talked about it, wasn't strong on it, or considered it strongly. But the thing is, like, if I was him, for him at that point, it would be like, no way to leave, right? Now, if it's a different time and different place, and he wasn't being used well, it's like, yeah, go. And maybe he would have, but he was being used well. The Punk thing came up, and the Punk feud ended up being probably his career highlight. So it was very smart of him. It wasn't time for him to go. But everybody's situation is different. I mean, I think even though he's doing really, really well, a guy who I think probably would have benefited greatly to go was Gable. He's good now. But I mean, I think that, like, especially because like FTR, who do have power, especially Dax, on booking and everything, they would take care of him, and if he would have gone, and stylistically, Tony would have loved him. It's like he's still, limited, with that perception of, he's Shorty G and just kind of a the comedy underneath guy who actually can wrestle good. Whereas with AEW, I mean, he could be world champion because he's so talented, and that's not going to happen in WWE, I don't think.
But he might have new life as a heel in Mexico.
Yes, that's true. That's true now. Yeah.
All right, we'll put a couple questions in here as we're doing the chat. So we have super chat from Vincent. Do you think in time the women in Japanese wrestling will look at Io Shirai much like the Luchadors do Rey Mysterio?
Yes, in time. I do think so. Now that she's really broken through. Yeah. And the other thing too is it will, like for Japanese women starting out in Mexico, one of the things that's really happening right now is that before, like, if you were a young kid in Mexico, your dream was to wrestle at Arena Mexico. Now your dream is going to be, WWE. But not everyone, but for a lot of people. And in Japan, your thing might have been Stardom, might be your dream, right? And now I think for a lot of people it'll be WWE. So that's the ultimate dream, and you use the local, you use Stardom to build a name to go to WWE rather than Stardom is the end result. Like those All Japan Women stars of the 80s and 90s, right? I mean, it was like All Japan Women was the end result. There was no, the men's promotions didn't have women's matches. The idea of going to the United States, there's women's wrestling in the United States sucked. You know what I mean? It was there. Now, it's like you see, Io Shirai and Kairi and others, even like Riho or Shida or whatever, and the dream is the United States. I think the same with baseball players now too, probably in Japan. Because like when I was going to Japan, like the idea of a Japanese player, and they had some awesome players. There was really almost none of them ever went to the United States. And now, if you're like a superstar in Japan, the place is the United States. So I see like that is a similarity.
Do you remember who the very first Japanese player to come to the U.S. was?
Was it Masanori Murakami?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I actually knew that. That was a long time ago. And he didn't do much either, did he? In the United States?
I don't think he played very, very long. Maybe only like 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, he was not like a big star. It wasn't like Ichiro Suzuki who came here and became like a Hall of Famer or something.
Hideo Nomo in the mid '90s was kind of like the bridge, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And then now, like, my buddy just got back from Japan. He's like, you can't move your head without seeing anything Shohei.
Oh, I mean, even the last time I went there, with Ichiro Suzuki, I just remember, yeah. And now, Otani's got to be. He's got to be gigantic there, sure.
All right, another question about women's wrestling in general, just specifically from Thomas. He's talking about the incredible matches in 2025, including the first 2 5-star matches that Dave has given for women's matches that took place in North America. What has been so impressive in 2025 on the women's side, and how does 2025 rank in terms of the best years for women's pro wrestling historically?
That's hard because, I mean, like, early 90s was so good, in Japan. So I can't say that it's where, I mean, I went to those All Japan Women shows in the '90s. They were so great, and there's some of the ones I didn't go to, like the first, those two All Star Dream Slams, where like every match was like a 4-star match up and down the show, almost everyone. You had like Manami Toyota, who's still in some ways like, I mean, Io was very much like Manami Toyota. The one, and I hate to compare them, but I think Manami Toyota was the better athlete of the two. And that's, I think Io's got more personality for sure, and also quite athletic and everything. But Toyota just had like that ridiculous stamina, throwing like 10 drop kicks in a row, high one after the other, things like that. That just was incredible. But yeah, so I would say that period, early '90s Japan, would be better for American wrestling. Of course, it's improved exponentially. I mean, I remember when that Charlotte Flair Natty match in NXT, which was like the kind of big breakthrough, with Rick and Brett in the corners, where it was really a great match, not just a great women's match, but a great match. Like that match, if you put that match on today, it should be normal. I mean, it'd be above average, but it wouldn't be like, it wouldn't hold a candle to the match at WrestleMania or the Tony Storm and Mariah May match, at the pay-per-view. I mean, that was like a throwback to the '80s. You know what I mean? In the '80s, All Japan Women with Chikusa Nagai with Matsumoto, with all the blood and everything like that. That was, and had the big storyline too. I mean, that was different. But yeah, I mean, the quality of the NXT women's matches are high. I mean, it's one of the things with WWE and lesser extent AEW is also that again, the bringing in women from other markets. I mean, Julia's from Japan, Stephanie Vaquer from Chile and then Mexico. And a lot of these women, I mean, under the prior regime in WWE, I mean, I don't know that any of them get anywhere as talented as they were, because it just wasn't what was, I mean, the mentality of what women wrestling was, was completely different. And again, we've talked about it a million times, and she doesn't get the credit, but the most important person in this equation is still Ronda Rousey, because the thing was is that, yeah, we put them on, it's like something different, but it's not serious and they'll never draw. And when Ronda Rousey drew, it was kind of like, and it took them years, believe me, those people, and it did in all combat sports. When she drew, it was like beginner's luck, flash in the pan, only her, what I mean, every time, and then she got bigger and bigger. And then really, I think it was the Holly Holm fight, where it was, I think that may have been the peak, but it was so big. I mean, I just remember, going to the grocery store the day after the Holly Holm Ronda Rousey fight, and people were coming up to me and saying, "Did you see that fight last night?" It wasn't like I was wearing anything, but it was just one of those things where, that was like a level of interest, and just basically proved, and WWE's proved it now, in the sense of you can put women in main events, and NXT basically banks everything around the women. I mean, they're the bigger stars than the men in a lot of ways, or at least be very equal. It's just changed. But yeah, for the United States, it's way better than it was, even over a year ago. I mean, I see the big differences.
So I'm reading the '84 book, which is all about WWE expansion, and so obviously this AAA thing this is kind of funny that it happened while I'm reading the book. But Curtis, so he's actually sent this a couple of weeks ago, but I think it's relevant. He said, "My first thought after seeing WWE purchasing AAA went back to The Rock's strange social media post wearing the New Japan shirt. Is WWE back in expansion mode? And could that post be viewed in the light of WWE making a play for New Japan? The economy in Japan remains in a weakened state. Could they make a large offer to Bushiroad?"
Anything's possible. Anything's possible. I mean, Dwayne obviously had something up his sleeve doing that. But it would be tough to sell New Japan to WWE. It would be viewed very negatively in Japan. More than even the AAA sale was in Mexico, because the the Japanese fan base. It's not that they don't like WWE, but I don't think they want their New Japan Pro Wrestling to be WWE either.
But what about the flip side, which is you got another really rich guy running the other company who you already work with?
My gut is that if it came to that, it depends on the day and the economics and the mentality. WWE does have more money to work with, but they're not as willing to spend it. Like, I mean, perfect example is Ring of Honor, right? They both were after Ring of Honor, and obviously Tony made the bigger bid. And I would think that if it came down to that, I think Tony would make the bigger bid. Like if New Japan was really for sale, like WWE would, they'd take it for like a low number. You know what I mean? I don't think they're looking at a big money purchase. I could be wrong. I think Tony would probably outbid for that, but I don't know if that's a good idea for Tony, because Japan is a completely different market, and owning New Japan Pro Wrestling. I mean, he's been a big fan of him for forever and ever, and it's cool. But it's again, American navigating that Japanese market's difficult. WWE would be difficult too. But they have. I mean, they could open an office and things like that. I don't know. I don't expect New Japan to sell, but stranger things can happen. I mean, they're not making giant profits there, and they are struggling. And they, again, they and Stardom both are going to be whatever, like making hold on just a second. Anyway, just keep going.
Okay. Nick Khan might buy it for Bryan Danielson and not realize that Bryan Danielson retired.
Yeah.
Okay. This is from Jonas. To me, the most intriguing match this weekend is Ozawa versus Kenta. How well do we think Noah does in Sumo Hall, and is Ozawa a favorite for Rookie of the Year?
I think Ozawa's a rookie. I'd look it up, but I mean, Ozawa has definitely increased business for Noah. I mean, it was like the right thing at the right time. So, I mean, I'm very interested in, it's an intriguing match. In some ways you could say it's the biggest match of the weekend, because, well, New Japan's got those big shows, like the big world title matches, Goto and Cal Newman, which, I mean, I just watched the Cal Newman video, which is so very, very, like you really want to get behind the guy and everything, and they need stuff like that, because, that's the kind of guys who they have now. It's one of those things. So, but yeah, I could see Ozawa Kenta being in Japan actually the bigger match of the two, which is, for the Noah show at Sumo Hall, yeah.
Are your texts about WWE releases?
Probably. I'm trying not to look at it,